We've been hearing a lot in the news about how video games are having an effect on children. And this week, a scientific paper from Oxford said video games are beneficial, even improving cognitive or intellectual ability. However, another paper by scientists from Dartmouth College claimed that there are negative social impacts if games are played for too long. So who and what should we believe? Jenny Smith has been talking to Duncan Astle from the University of Cambridge Brain Sciences Unit.
The two studies look at the relationship between how much video gameplay children engage in and different kinds of psychological and social factors. So, for example, how pro-social they are or how hyperactive or inattentive they are. It could go both ways. And what these two studies have both shown is that there is a significant relationship between how much video gameplay children engage in and different kinds of psychological and social factors.
So why do you think they found different results?
One of the studies has shown that a little bit of gameplay, so up to an hour a day, can confer some benefits relative to playing no games at all. Playing a moderate amount, so playing 1 to 3 hours a day, has no real effect. And playing more than 3 hours a day, so what they refer to as heavy gameplay, has a negative effect. Some of these games are really taxing of particular cognitive skills. Like attention, you have to kind of ignore distractions, or memory, you have to remember where various things are within the game. And they would argue is that when you play a little bit of the game, you get the kind of cognitive benefits, but you don't spend so long playing the game that you don't experience everything else in the world around you that's important for cognitive development. But we should also flag up that there are some problems here. So one of the issues here is that the relationship may be significant, but it's also often quite small. So in one of the studies, for example, the effect of the gameplay actually accounts for 1% of the prosocial or hyperactivity measured in these children.
So in real life, you wouldn't really be able to notice that difference in your child?
Absolutely. So yes, you would be hard-pressed to notice that kind of difference. And indeed, that is one of the arguments that the authors put forward very heavily, is that anyone who's made very bold claims about the impacts of video gameplay may well be exaggerating their impact.
Isn't there something else going on here, though? Because I can imagine that a child who was already not very sociable might be drawn to playing video games in their room for hours on end because they didn't want to go outside and play. So how can we tell which way round the relationship is?
That is essentially one of the inherent problems with these kinds of studies. So they're essentially what we call correlational studies. So they've taken natural variability in how much children engage or for how long they engage in playing games and looked at the relationship between that and other kinds of factor. We can't necessarily from that infer causation. So, for example, if we took a large group of children and we measured their shoe size and how many words they knew, their vocabulary, we would find a really close relationship between the two. And that's not because learning new words makes your feet grow. It's simply because the older you get, the bigger your feet become and the more words you learn. So we can't necessarily from this infer that playing the video games is causing changes. It could very well be, as you say, the other way around.
So we've talked a bit about the Oxford study that found this benefit to the 1 hour of playing, but what about the other one that said that any kind of playing of these violent video games was negative? Can you tell me a little bit about what they did?
So one of the big differences is that it's different types of games. So in the first study, they are, as far as we can tell, they're including any type of gameplay. Whereas in this study, they're meaning very particular adult-like games. They followed the adolescents over time from around 13 through to around 18. And what they were able to show was that early gameplay, when the individual's around 13, would be predictive of subsequent problems with things like aggression and smoking and drinking.
But you still can't know if it's just that adolescent had that kind of personality that drew them to the game and then later drew them to those kind of behaviours, can you?
No, so it's still essentially correlational. And it's really hard to tease these things apart, whether it's the gameplay that's driving these things or there's some initial kind of characteristic which is differentially expressed over time, initially as gameplay and subsequently as other things like drinking and aggression.
So you work on what's actually going on in the brain when children practice various different things. Do these studies fit in with the kind of thing you've been finding?
we're really interested in how children respond to highly structured games, and they're games that tax cognitive skills like executive functions. So executive functions are things like attention and memory, and we know they're really important in everyday life, and they're really important in the classroom. They predict really well how well children will learn and how much progress they can make in the classroom. And so we're really interested in, if you give children intensive practice using games that tax these kinds of skills, what kind of effect that has on the child's brain. But the way we design our studies is slightly different. So rather than looking at natural variability in gameplay, as these studies do, we randomly allocate the children to different groups. And one of the group will experience a kind of daily bout of intensive, cognitively demanding practice on a game, usually for around 30 or 40 minutes. And the other group will experience a less taxing game. And we're interested in what the differential effect of those two is. And so we're looking at how intensive practice will change things like the way different connections work within children's brains. And our early results suggest that there are some important differences, and that you can train certain types of simple cognitive skill, and that does have an impact on the child's brain.
Duncan Astle on the impact of video games on children.